Penny and the Murderer. You never know about people. The mistake of slotting a person like a postcard, imagining you know from the outside what goes on inside, imagining you know what they'll do in all circumstances, never came so true as when Penny moved in with the murderer. It all started when one of our friends gave us a heads up about Penny's new boyfriend. He lived at the Y then, and Sharon, who worked at the state police, saw his picture on the sex offender bulletin board. I think that's where she saw it. Penny had already brought him to a couple of our homes. He seemed okay, kind of crude in his manners. But then Penny was no Jackie Kennedy herself. She lived at Margie Booker's rooming house and worked part-time in the mailroom of the Bushnell building. We'd known Penny for a couple of years by then. She came here down on her luck, got her clothes at the Sally Ann's, had only about half of her front teeth and not many in back either. Not much education, but she could read and do cash register arithmetic. You'd call her generous. Whatever she had, you could have half of it. Hell, take it all if you need it. A little woman with a big heart and a big laugh. Of her shadowy history, she dropped few clues. We could only say for certain that she was from somewhere down south, Oklahoma maybe, or Texas. I guessed she'd moved around a lot from one place to another, always morphing herself to fit in. She did that here, and maybe that's why you couldn't tell by her way of talking just where she came from. Her persistence moved us from pity to grudging respect. I say grudging because when we offered the kind of help we thought she needed, she defiantly moved in her own direction. She did it her way. The murderer, his name was Luke, didn't have any regular employment. He picked up odd jobs posted at the Y. He didn't say much. A big, chunky, often unshaven man with a selfie-facing manner as befitted a sex offender. He had a limp that he told Penny guaranteed his disabled veteran benefits as soon as his paperwork went through. The rumor started like a pebble dropped into a smooth pond when Sharon told it to Penny's best friend, Tina Marie. Did you know that Penny's boyfriend is on parole and has to register as a sex offender? Well, no, Tina Marie didn't know that, and neither did the rest of us, not even Penny. We didn't think she did, anyway. Someone should talk to her. We really ought to warn her. We all said it, but it was Tina Marie who took on the task of bad messenger. Maybe that was noble, but knowing Tina Marie, I suspected she had an extra motive besides Penny's welfare. See, Tina Marie had been working her persuasive ways to get Penny to move into her basement. Same rent as Penny paid at Margie Booker's, but she'd have her own entrance and her own private bathroom, plus kitchen privileges. Maybe she saw potential in Penny as a dog sitter. Tina Marie had a pit bull named Fang that got along with Penny, but not with anybody else much. Only now Penny's subsidized housing had come through. If she wanted to, Penny could get a real apartment of her own and have the rent paid by the state of Oregon. Tina Marie saw this as even more reason for Penny to move into her basement. She could charge the maximum the state allowed, and the two of them could split the extra money. Wouldn't that be slick? Anyway, Tina Marie took off for Margie Booker's to warn Penny about Luke, the sex offender. Good luck, was all I thought. Damn if Penny wasn't in the middle of packing when Tina Marie got there. She'd already found an apartment and was moving into it. If Tina Marie was pissed that Penny had gone her own way, she would never say so. No, she would just deliver her information. I wouldn't say with relish, but then I wasn't there. Penny said, "So what?" as we expected her to. Willful little Penny had no trouble resisting other people's good intentions, which made her an unusual challenge for Tina Marie, who would use a mixture of flattery and cajolery and whatever else was called for to get what she wanted from practically anybody. And she usually got it, especially from men. Every man I knew had been taken for some kind of a ride by Tina Marie. Women, too, for that matter. I wasn't immune. One time she told me a mainly fabricated story, playing on my prejudices, a story that persuaded me to volunteer as accomplice in a kidnapping scheme that would have carried 2 underage girls across the state line in my vehicle. I would have done it, too, but she got a man to help her instead, a retired deputy, no less. I only found out the truth of the matter because the state police caught them. Sharon told me the actual story. Tina Marie had told me a pack of lies, and she had told the man yet another story. He would have been incarcerated to this day if it hadn't been for him being an ex-sheriff. He was let go, and the underage girls were quietly returned to their foster homes. As for me, I never felt such a fool. Anyway, a week after Penny got her subsidized apartment, we all had a baby shower for somebody's daughter. After a few beers, lips got loose. Pretty soon we were all unloading our concerns about Penny dating an ex-con, sex offender, murderer. Penny, after 1 or 2 beers, gave us to know that Luke was keeping his parole and that he'd served his time, if he even did do the crime, because he said he'd been on drugs, and he couldn't answer for the night the woman was raped and beaten, so he couldn't really defend himself either. He just didn't know. Either way, he'd been convicted and sentenced and went to jail for 13 years, less 2 years for good behavior. And it was not any of our goddamn business anyway. None of us. The month was May. Penny had a swell apartment, bedroom upstairs, kitchen and bath down, even a shared patio with a barbecue. Penny invited us all over for a Memorial Day cookout. Tina Marie was all dressed up in a red split-up-the-side skirt and open-toe high heels, with her face made up like a movie star. She brought her 2 teenage daughters and the 3 grandkids with her. But she didn't look like anybody's grandmother. I thought she looked like somebody's mother, trying to look like a high-class call girl. She came on to every male over the age of 12. Oh, she could really turn it on. Couple other kids showed up and started a noisy game of Crazy Eights on the picnic table. Luke got right in there with them, shouting and throwing cards like a big noisy kid himself. Tina Marie played a few hands. Every time she took a card, she leaned across the table, offering Luke a generous view of her breasts. Luke didn't know where to put his eyes, until one of the parents got her away from the game and on some pretext. Tina Marie was trying to make trouble, of course. Maybe she was trying to split them up, Luke and Penny. We passed around rare hamburgers and crunchy chicken wings and potato salad. Some of us were drinking Miller Lite. There was a bottle of Hardy Burgundy. Can't recall who drank that. Don't recall what Luke was drinking. Pepsi Light, I think, because there were quite a few cans on the table. The card game got louder by the minute. I hope Penny had tolerant neighbors. Tina Marie didn't join the game again, just stood watching. stood watching where Luke couldn't fail to see her if he took his eyes off the table. Then a cop car pulls up across the street, and here comes a pair of deputies. What the hell? Damned if they didn't take Luke away in handcuffs. Parole violation, they told him. He knew better than to associate with minors. They had him, too, because even though most of the grown-ups had already gone home, Tina Marie had lingered, and her underage children were still playing cards with Luke when the cops pulled up. I'll be straight with you. I didn't like Luke, but I was moved to pity when they took him away like that, his hands shackled, his belly hanging out where his shirt had crawled up and his pants had crawled down due to having loosened his belt to accommodate all the barbecue he ate. Naturally, he couldn't pull him up with his hands behind his back like that. His pants cuffs dragged the ground so he tripped and would have fallen, if not for the two deputies. They had firm hold of him. They let him loose the next day. His P.O. told him not to associate with that crowd anymore, so I heard. That was fine with me, fine with all of us except Penny, I guess. The thing I wondered was how the cops knew he was there violating his parole. I suppose Penny's neighbors might have called them. Rather than complain to us about the noise, just get the cops to handle it. Thing is, though, Penny only just moved in. She never told us, her friends, one word about Luke's legal problems. So why would she tell her new neighbors first thing? Oh yeah, my boyfriend, he's on parole for rape and homicidal battery. I don't think so. Then who? Tina Marie jumped into my mind like a devious toad. Not only is much of her quality time with Penny swallowed up by Luke, but she had little thing going with one of the county deputies, a married one. If someone had just called the cops, then the city cops would have come. But these cops were from the county sheriff, and of course, most of the offending minors were Tina's own family. I didn't say anything, not directly, but I asked Penny, "How's it going, Penny? Your boyfriend get everything straightened out?" "Oh, yeah," she said, "he did. If you're on parole, you ain't supposed to associate with no kids. He should have gone when he saw they was kids." "Yeah," I said, "wonder how they knew he was there." A shrewd look flashed on her face for about a half second. "Don't know," was all she said, with a little shrug. Penny was loyal, you have to give her that. But I saw that look. Maybe she had the same idea I had about Tina. But Tina Marie was her friend, and Penny wasn't going to badmouth her. Not unless she knew for sure. And she would prefer not to know. I judged this was a mark of inferior intelligence. I thought, no wonder she works in the mailroom. I guess that tells you something about me, doesn't it? But wait. A few days later, stories about Luke were circulating like the contents of a flush toilet. Women who ought to know better spread the word that Luke was a known child molester. They felt compelled to tell every parent, would have put it on the front page of the paper if they could, and on TV. At the market, one of the husbands, the man never was wrapped too tight, a little bantam with snapping brown eyes and a tongue sharper than his brain, he goaded Luke into a fist fight. Told Luke if he ever caught him near his daughter or his wife, why, he'd break his goddamn neck with his bare hands. I guess the cops got in on that one too, but nobody was arrested. The upshot was a hearing at the P.O.'s office. The grown-ups from the Memorial Day barbecue had witnesses to the supermarket incident were there. I went. Wouldn't have missed it. I'll tell you who did miss it, though. No Penny and no Luke. No Tina Marie either, but that only confirmed what I suspected, that it was Tina Marie engineered Luke's bust and probably lit fire to the rumors. Someone with a saner head than most asked the PO if Luke actually had any convictions as a child molester. Well, no, he hadn't. In fact, he had no arrests or convictions on his record except for the ones for which he had served time. The PO was satisfied that Luke had no parole violations except for associating with minors in spite of the provocations of the supermarket incident. Now that she had an apartment, Penny entertained almost every night. You could drop in unannounced and she'd feed you, get out the Scrabble board, turn on wrestling. Every time I dropped by, there was at least 2 or 3 hanging out. Usually Tina Marie was there, often Luke was. The two seldom spoke, as if they had arrived at an armed truce. Penny came to work a few weeks later wearing a cheap engagement ring. The diamond was small and probably only a CZ anyway. She never missed a chance to show it off, though, handing over mail with her left hand instead of dropping it in your inbox like she usually did. And then Luke moved into Penny's subsidized housing. His VA money had come through. Penny, we said, won't you lose your housing subsidy? She gave her little shrug. She might, but they could get along fine on his VA money and what earnings they both had. And whose business was it anyway except hers? Right. Luke's cohabitation made little difference at first. Penny still brought her friends home. On the weekends, if they had their kids with them, Luke had to leave, but sometimes he had odd jobs on the weekend anyway. Luke's favorite pastime was garage sales, and he liked to visit the dump or the back of the Salvation Army building on Sunday. He picked up interesting, potentially valuable objects, electronic equipment, tools, furniture, appliances, clothes, blankets, LPs, musical instruments, all kinds of things. If he couldn't carry them all himself, Penny's friend Louis could. Louis worked for a landscaper and used the truck whenever he wanted. The no longer subsidized apartment filled up fast. After a while, it was impossible to sit at the table, so stacked was it with collectibles. Guests squeezed together on the fold-out sofa, where Penny's down-and-out friends or their relatives often spent the night. Cards and Scrabble were impossible now, but you could still hold a plate on your lap and find a place for a can of pop or a beer on the floor if you wanted to watch TV and visit. Call me a snob then, but I couldn't stand that place anymore. You couldn't walk in it. Even in the bathroom, a stack of boxes had to be moved from the toilet seat to the sink and back to accomplish your purpose. Penny said, "When you coming over?" I made excuses. Few of our crowd, the people she worked with, visited her anymore. Mostly it was just down-and-outers that Penny collected and made space for. Then Bushnell management laid her off. Probably not her fault. They laid off a lot of people that time of year. We had to get our own mail now. Penny got unemployment, but it wasn't much. Next time I saw her, she told me things were pretty tight for them. She said that Luke had to start therapy. That was part of his parole. Had to pay for it himself. This was news. He'd been on parole for at least a year by then. She said if worse came to worse, they could give up the apartment and move to the hobo camp outside town. How could they do that without even a car? What would they live in? And what would they do with a collection of exotic plunder that spilled out of their bedroom down the stairs and crammed their home almost to the ceiling? Toaster ovens, vacuum cleaners, microwaves, CB radios, television sets, video players, cameras, boxes of books, jewelry, kitchen tools, picture frames, toolboxes, a chainsaw, a weed eater, a rusty shotgun, vice grips, a drill press, a workout bench and weights, new cutlery in dusty cartons, garbage bags full of what? Clothes, bedding? Okay, yes, I laughed at their plight. But underneath, I was feeling dark alarm. I did not want Penny to move into a tent in some state park, far from neighbors or telephones, with a murderer. So much feudal drama had already churned over Luke's crimes, real or imaginary, that I kept my worries to myself, but they didn't go away. I tried to call Penny a couple of times a week. She told me Luke had lost his VA money, at least for that month, due to a paperwork snafu. I doubted it was possible to lose VA money, so I thought it was a line of bullshit he'd given her because he blew his money on something besides the rent, gambling maybe, or booze, a parole no-no, or maybe just more junk. The dark worry in my heart got bigger. We had a hamburger and fries at McDonald's, and I gave her a few bucks. I talked to Sharon finally. I thought she'd know what to do, working for the state cops and all. Luke always seems to go along with whatever Penny wants, I said, but he filled their place up with so much trash that she can't have company anymore. She doesn't see any of her friends now, except for bums, and now he's fixed things so she might have to move out to that camp, isolated and helpless. He could be dangerous, I told her. Sharon said he might be, but unless he violated parole or threatened somebody, well, nothing we can do. Next time I called Penny, the phone was disconnected. I went to her place. They were gone. So was most of the junk. I wanted to look for her, but I didn't know exactly where the camp was. What if Luke had already killed her? And then I show up and he kills me too. I thought of Lewis, who knew them both, and I was sure he'd know how to find them, probably help them move. I said, Lewis, you feel like driving me to the state park? I'll pay you. The hobo camp was a crazy quilt of tents and pickups and trailers and clotheslines and burn barrels. It was late afternoon, and a dense mist was rolling in from the coast, making everything wet. Not many were outside. I thought, well, we just have to find the biggest pile of junk. And there was plenty of junk, too. But Lewis braked beside a big travel trailer and touched his horn. After a minute, the door opened, and there was Penny, all in one piece and grinning like a jack-o'-lantern. "Come on in," she said. Cardboard boxes were stacked up inside, but the place was neat. Except for a silent TV and stereo and one or two other items, no sign of the trashy treasures from her old place. A stew bubbled on a butane cooktop. I could see a neatly made bed where a white cat groomed itself on top of a handmade quilt. Well, she wasn't exactly sure where Luke was. In town, maybe. Today was his therapy day, and he might have gone by the thrift store before heading home. The trailer? This old thing? It's okay for now, said Penny. Luke traded off some of that junk for it. Lewis and we each had a bowl of the stew. She poured us coffee from a reclaimed tin coffee pot. Strong as battery acid. Still, no doubt about it, Penny could cook. I guess we were there for a couple of hours. Still no Luke. It got dark, and Penny lit a pair of kerosene lamps. Saves the batteries for the TV, she said. Luke never did show up. I saw Luke around town sometimes. When I had time, I stopped by Penny's. Sometimes Luke was there, sometimes other people, usually people from the camp. Tina Marie was often there. She and Penny seemed tighter than ever, giggling like schoolgirls with a secret. I suspected Penny relied on Tina Marie for trips to town. I saw Penny in Tina Marie's car sometimes, and sometimes I saw Luke riding with her instead. Tina Marie missed at least a week of work before they found her. Her office called every day, but no answer. The dog was tied outside and raised a fuss when he ran out of food. The neighbors called the cops. They said she'd been dead for a week. The paper said she probably fell and hit her head on a cast iron grate. We all thought someone had killed her. We all thought Luke did it. I never saw Luke again after that. Neither did anyone else I asked. Next time I saw Penny, she and a couple of shopping bags were hitching out to the camp, and I gave her a lift. "Too bad about Tina Marie," I said tentatively. I saw her shrug in the rearview mirror. "Yeah," she said, "accidents happen." She asked me in. I admit I was scared, but my curiosity won out. Was Luke going to look like the guilty son of a bitch he was? But Luke wasn't home. Just Penny and her white cat and another pot of stew. It was even better this time. And then, about a month later, Luke's picture showed up on the crime page. Wanted for parole violation. Penny didn't know where he was. I was sure he split because he was afraid they'd get him for what happened to Tina Marie. A few weeks passed, and one day I dropped by the homeless camp. Penny's big trailer was gone. Her neighbors said that a pickup came and towed it away one night. Louis, I thought, and went looking for him. He was easy to find. I just drove around until I saw the landscaping truck. But Louis said he had not seen Penny or Luke in months. No, he had not helped move the trailer. I told him I was afraid for her life. I thought Luke must have killed Tina. In fact, I was a bit hysterical and said way too much. But that is how I found out. We were sitting in the grimy front seat of the landscaping truck. Louis was smoking. We each had a can of Miller's from a cooler in back of the cab. He said not to worry about Penny. "That kitty cat," he said, "will always land on her feet." "What do you mean?" "Luke," he said, "he went down for Penny." What did he mean? Was he talking about sex, I wondered? No. Penny was the salt of the earth in Louis's book. She'd give you $2 if she only had 3. Always been that way. He'd known her in Tennessee 15, maybe 20 years ago, and not quick to temper either. Just laugh things off most of the time. Quick to forgive if not to temper. Good as gold that way. But if you went too far, like steal from her too many times or mess with her man, you better look out, because she would not forget and she would not forgive. She was a little thing, no more than dangerous than a fly. That's if you were her friend. Luke went down for her. That woman he was supposed to rape and murder, he didn't. He was stoned out of his head. That woman, Lorraine, she crawled in his sleeping bag on her own. He must have fucked her because they got him for rape. But it was Penny beat her with a golf club. Beat her senseless. Everybody knew. But Luke, he thought he could do the time better than Penny. "Wait," I said, "you mean they knew each other 15 years ago in Tennessee?" Well, yeah, he said, I thought you knew that. Could I believe Louis? Could I believe any of them? So I kept my mouth shut for once. I began to wonder, did Penny bash Tina's head? Maybe Tina Marie started something with Luke. I'd seen her come on to him once or twice. She did that with every man she met. And Luke? Split maybe because he didn't want to take the rap for Penny again. Where was Luke? Penny and the big travel trailer are long gone from this town. But Luke, he was found by a state cop up on Huckleberry Ridge more than a year later. There wasn't much left, but they finally got his ID from prison dental records. The paper said someone blew his face off with a shotgun.